So, hello everybody. Today is Wednesday, December 10th, and it's neural network time again. It's Wednesday, so good to see everybody. We have this week's meeting and next week's meeting, and then we'll be off for 2 weeks for the break. But first, I should have thought of this before. Let me pause for just a minute to do our kind of personal check-ins. Just a minute. So, hello, everybody. Today is Wednesday, December 10th, and it is the weekly meeting of the Neural Network. Glad to see everybody here. And also, we are especially happy to see those of you who can't follow us live, but look at the recording later. And hopefully, I'll be able to get to that soon. So, we're going to dive right into our agenda today. I'll share that on the screen so that folks who are watching the recording have access to it. But here we are. And first order of business is the video that we just finished. Remember, this was based on Ryan's ACTFL presentation and then went through several iterations with various AI components. And we ended up with about a 7-minute video, I think. And Jenny, I don't know if you've seen it
I
or
have
not.
seen it. Thank you.
Oh, good, good.
Yes.
So everybody should have had a chance to look at that. We've had 36 views to date, as I noted there, and we need to talk quickly about who else needs to see it and how we can get the word out. Because I think it's not complete by any means, but I think it serves as an introduction.
Very
But
good.
one of the things when I reviewed it, Tom, is that really stuck out with me. I think I worked with AP College Board for many years,
Right.
and AP is something not offered in many high schools because exactly of what, they're not, an instructor cannot be provided for a variety of reasons. And that's in, I think, your second set, if you scroll down a little bit, it's the second one where you talk a little bit about AP. I think that is a big hook for teachers to really, or and principals in particular, to really want to act upon something like Phil because it allows those AP kids to actually create their own, their own, I don't want to say curriculum, but their own outcomes and look at using that test as kind of their format to really escalate their opportunity for getting a better score because they get college credit.
Yeah.
So,
Well, two things then, Allie. First of all, I want to make sure to give credit where credit is due, and that is Michelle does such a great job usually starting the agenda each week, and she was the one who put together the list here. It
mhm.
wasn't I who did it. But the second and perhaps more important follow-up question is you've raised a really good point
Mm.
about the value to AP programs. How do we perhaps get the message
Oh,
to
that's
the AP
easy.
language community?
I can send you all that information. And Marcia Arndt used to be my big contact, but J.C. Morales
Yeah.
is still at College Board. I think he's back at College Board, like for the third time.
Ah.
But he's great at that job. So
Well, Ali, rather than send it to me, could I just ask you to cut out the middleman? And would you be comfortable sending it to some of the AP folks that could benefit from it?
yeah, but I would prefer that you kind of give me the narrative
Oh,
of,
sure.
you know, of what you think needs to be included.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do a first draft. I'll send it to you and then you look at it. And then I'll be happy to send them a little blurb about this and invite them to the community or to
Yeah.
our actual meeting would even be better.
Yeah. And yeah, our community meetings that are held many Wednesdays after this would perhaps be the most appropriate place, but
Okay.
anybody is welcome here anytime. And, in all honesty, Ali, what I will do after you send me a draft, or if you like, I'll get with my BFF, one of them, and build a draft to send to you. And
Okay.
my BFF is one of the AIs.
Yeah.
I'll just explain who the audience is,
I'm
what
sorry,
we have to
Tom. I'm
offer.
sorry.
I know. I'm alone all day, Allie. Give me a break. But
Yeah.
oh, you wouldn't believe the conversations we've had. It's kind of troubling almost. All right. Um, Other ideas about how we get the video out as widely as possible.
Who at Actful would be the person to send it to?
Probably Kathy.
Kathy. I think Kathy is probably now the person. She's already seen it. She gave
Yes.
beautiful feedback. And I think maybe we should have a conversation with her. How does she sees that possibilities, in having, I don't want to say Actful endorse it, but but promote
Yeah.
it in some ways, bring it to the attention of.
Well, maybe one of us should do that on Actful Central.
Oh yeah, maybe that's the place to place it. The the community
Right.
piece, right? Mhm.
Right. Uh-huh. And I believe so strongly in what we're doing that I'm happy to do it, but at the same time, I'm happy to divide the work out.
Mhm.
And I'm as you might have noticed, I haven't yet gotten last week's recording ready and out to you, and I haven't gotten the many minutes of recording that I did in Ryan's classroom. So I have a lot of projects on tap. So if somebody wanted to tackle this one, that would be great.
What is
Does anyone
Kathy
have
Shelton's job? What is her actual title?
She's
who?
the head of professional development now. I mean,
Okay.
whatever Paul Sandrock's
The director of education. I think that's the
director of
formal title.
education.
I think
Okay.
that's what it is. Now,
Thank you, Art.
does anybody see any implications or assets for oh my God, I just lost it. Not the AP, but the International Baccalaureate. Is there another place where it could work in the
Hmm.
International Baccalaureate?
It would
I
certainly
honestly don't.
be worth talking to someone who is really intimately aware of what that takes,
Mhm.
both from the student or from an instructional point of view. Because it is different from AP,
It is
but I
different.
would not be able, for example, to put my finger exactly on the differences,
Yeah.
but knowing that would be helpful.
I think so. It would probably for them to be aware of it, and maybe because they're starting IBs now in the middle school, and
Right.
that might
Chicago has an
Yes.
extensive
and
IB.
that might be
Wow.
the entry point for recruiting and initiating a program at that level. That was just my thought that came to mind.
Yeah. Well, there's some
I
parallels
have a
there, because they do have a format that
Yeah,
has to be
yeah,
followed.
yeah.
And so, yeah, and it would give them examples, and they could do a lot of that on their own.
They could.
But
Yeah.
there is specific training for that, just like there is
yes.
for AP,
Yeah. There's a
and
curriculum. There's a set curriculum.
curriculum, and the teacher too, I think has
Yes,
to have a
yes.
certain certification or
Yeah.
something.
I have a friend who was a French teacher for many years and then became the head of a middle school IB program. She's getting ready to retire, but I would be delighted to send this video
Good.
forward to her and
Yeah.
get her initial feedback on it where IB is concerned.
Great. Beth, that would be super. And we should add another um, section of this chart that Michelle started for IB and AP and what we have to offer for each of those approaches. And so that would
I'm
have a lot.
thinking too that we may need to have some idea of what next steps would be. If I'm an AP teacher and I come in and I see it and I go, "Ooh, wow, I think I might be able to pull this into my program somehow, or I'd like to try this," and maybe a little bit of a defined what happens to the AP teacher or the IB teacher once they have a real interest. They want to, put it to, and you guys may have already done all of that. You may have a really good idea of what to tell them, about next. But
We don't really have
once
a
we
good,
garner their interest, we don't want to let them slip, without capitalizing on that by helping them get started, right?
we need some sort of onboarding protocol
Mm.
for regular
Mm.
teachers who
Mhm.
hear about it as well
Yes.
as language, as AP and IB. So Yeah, that's another good suggestion that we need to add to the chart.
You know, Tom, one
Although it's a
area
little
that I think it could be helpful too is in those um, not very favored exploratory classes.
Hmm.
Rather than have someone teach a little bit of whatever, um, put in a fill approach. And in a middle school, I think that would be great.
I think the middle school.
Yep.
And I think Ron from Nevada has a lot to contribute to us in that respect because he's pioneered that at a private school in Las Vegas,
Mhm.
where at the elementary level he had kids and they choose their language. So it's very different from what Flex or Flex Star used to be, or
Mhm.
Flex Star or whatever. Um, because the students are choosing their language and continuing with that. So yeah, that's another area that we need to reach.
Going back to AP briefly, I wonder if one question for JC isn't around the syllabus that teachers have to have approved for AP courses by College Board. Obviously, a student working in Phil, that would look very different. To what extent is that an obstacle for the teacher? And I can imagine ways around it, in terms of just setting some benchmarks. But I wonder if that's not something that should be asked.
Well, it really is a case too where that's where we need to lean into the idea that you don't have to take an AP class in order to sit for the exam.
Yeah, but Jay, I think the AP themes in itself is an organizing principle for Phil. You know, if we have the students hit all those themes,
Mhm.
I don't see how it would not be approved.
Mhm.
True, you know, the truth is, some of those courses been approved like 10 years ago,
Yeah, right.
and the current courses do not look anything like what was approved by College Board. I can tell you that I see that over and over for good reason. They've been updated and so forth. So I don't think that's going to be a big obstacle.
Okay, good.
Well, let's be sure to add it in here. And Ryan, did Ryan leave?
No, he's right here.
Yeah, my internet's a little spotty at the moment. It's been
Oh.
that way this afternoon. Sorry, was there a question posed to me?
Well, no, not yet. I was just getting ready to see if we could move on to the next agenda item, which is the latest from you. And I wanted to share the couple of things that you shared with me today. If
Oh, yeah.
so, I'd rather have you do it than me.
Sure. So, yeah, locally here, somebody had shared with the local newspaper, the Laurel Star, about the Leo Bernardo Award. So I was interviewed on Good
Nice.
Friday. Shared some pictures from the conference, and that made it into the Laurel Star. I haven't seen a copy of it yet, but I'm told that it made the front page.
Wow.
So it's small town news, but I'll take it. It's all the small wins we can get. And then another win I found out yesterday. I don't know if you folks remember last year we applied for the Cash for Class grant through a local business, a local chain of car dealerships, and they did it again this year. We applied for it and we got it again. So I got another $1,000 in the Phil
Nice.
coffers.
Yay.
And told the students, like, this is our money to spend. Let me know what you need. What resources are you finding that
Wow.
you want us to invest in? And in a way, I kind of feel like in the AI age, when we have access to so much, free stuff, it's tough to justify spending money. So we're really critical of what we spend the money on and make sure that it goes a long way. And then, yep, there it is.
There it is.
And then another small win for us is that one of the ASL learners, the student who had taken ASL last year and she stuck with it this year, I had purchased an extra ASL stamp test just to offer it to her and see if she wanted to try it out. So she took it this past week. And her scores came back already. She got a 4, an intermediate low in the receptive, and then she got 5, intermediate mid in the productive, which is amazing. So she's in her second semester of Phil, scoring intermediate mid level.
Wow.
So she's going to take it again a month from now. If she can get her, if she brings the receptive skill up to an intermediate, yep, there they are. if she brings her receptive up to intermediate mid, then I believe she'll be probably the first Phil student to earn a certificate of multiliteracy, if I had to guess. I mean, maybe there've been others, but
Amazing.
you know,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
she's
That-
super
Well,
excited for that.
Incredibly good news.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, keep us informed. And somewhere, if you can add the results of her latest stamp test into the accessible data, I don't know for sure. Ryan and I are working on an article for the Learning Educator magazine. So we'll be sure to include it in there. And then Ryan and his advisor are hard at work on one for flannels. So am I accurate with that, Ryan?
Yep. I just met with her yesterday. We're kind of kicking the draft back and forth, and I think our due date is January 1st, so we'll have it submitted before then for sure.
Yeah, that's coming up soon. All right, let me go back if I can to the agenda. Yep, one moment. I'm one of these people who has way too many things open. Let's see. I think that's probably all from Ryan. I also wanted to share some other news, and this is via Michelle and her contacts. But Emily Ubel, who you may remember coming from Michigan State University, has applied for a pretty significant grant for MSU that won't, but they finally got approval for submitting the grant from the university folks. So it'll be several months before they hear about that. But I think that that's tremendously important that we encourage our colleagues to be doing this sort of grant work for a number of reasons. One is we can always use the resources, and I mean each teacher, professor individually, but it benefits us all. And then also just the fact that we are able to start spreading the word that Phil is now going from elementary school through the university level around the country. So that's really good. Um, I had a conversation via email with Lulu Buck from Colorado this week, and she wanted to let me know how excited she was that it looks like they are very close to getting state approval for Phil statewide
Wow.
in Colorado. There were a couple of things that I suggested with her. Uh, it was fortunately in enough time, but she had left out a couple of things that I think have been keys to success for Ryan's program that I shared with her. One of which was the importance of having students apply to be into the Phil approach, because we don't want anybody in there who's not going to be successful. So
Yeah.
having them apply with some sort of evidence that they have experience and success as an individual learner, I think is important. So that was one thing. The other thing that I think from an outside point of view, and Ryan may or may not agree with this, but I think having the credit be reliant on demonstrated proficiency by an outside source is absolutely critical, so that you don't get kids who, this would be probably the Tommy Welches of the world, who get into it because they're real enthusiastic, but after a few months they say, I've got so much else going on, I'll just take the C or the B, which doesn't align at all with our proficiency approach that we have worked so hard on with Phil. So, Ryan, what role? Because I know respectfully that they don't do that in Wisconsin, or at least they haven't yet. I think we had some conversation with Claudine at the meeting that I think she's ready to take a look at that. But Ryan, what would you think that is one of the key factors for your students' motivation and success?
I'm sure it definitely is. I mean, that one doesn't get expressed quite as much as simply the graduation credit, but no, it is the case that the students course weight is dependent on the stamp test. And so we put language in the student handbook that kind of spells it all out. In Delaware, after 2 years of language learning, the expected proficiency level is novice high. And so we kind of worked using that, where we said, okay, well, after 1 year of language learning, the expectation would be novice mid. And so then students who had a composite score of higher than a novice mid would get the honors credit. And then for the second year, if the students had a composite score higher than novice high, they would get the honors credit, and then kind of so on and so forth through the proficiency levels. If the students scored advanced, at least a 7 on the stamp test for all of the scores, then they would get the advanced credit, which for us is a 1.4 weight, equal to an AP course or a dual enrollment course. So that was something that I brought to the table and introduced to the district. It's the first time that the district had done it, but I had heard talk of other districts up north doing such a thing. And I thought that it made sense, kind of going off of what you said, Tom, about for the students that sign up for an honors course but aren't necessarily in it for, advancing their learning. But I think it's been a good thing so far, and I don't see us changing it.
Okay, good. This conversation with Lulu has also reminded me of the importance that we finish up the guiding principles, because I think if we, as part of the onboarding process that we discussed a little bit ago, I think if we focus on those guiding principles, and both of those elements are covered in our guiding principles, as I recall, that would probably help head off any problems that folks may have down the road. We want to make sure that the facilitator and the students are absolutely successful in every way that we can help them with. So, yeah. Ryan, I'm also wondering if you want to share the discussions you had with folks from the Delaware Department of Ed and also with your curriculum director, first from the state level and then the other one, because those were really exciting to me.
Sure. Yeah. Last Tuesday or Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday actually, we had a site visitor, a vendor for a contractor with the Department of Ed, with a company called Learning Focused, came in. I guess her role is to go around and observe principals, observe classes, and then offer feedback to the administration. And they brought her into my class. Into the Phil class, and I greeted her. I didn't know that they were coming for one, so that was a surprise to me. But I asked her, how much have they told you about what you're walking into? And she said that they explained that it was a class where the students got to pick the languages, and the students greeted her and were teaching her some of their target language, and she was just absolutely blown away by the amount of independence that the students had, the fact that they were on task throughout the course, and she was really blown away by just like the level of goal setting and attention to monitoring their progress was something that was one of her big takeaways. And so later on, I touched base with the curriculum director, and he shared that she again was really happy with what she saw, and they started having conversations, her and the administration, about how do we get the Phil, what she saw in Phil across other classes as well. And so our curriculum director I think it got his gears turning about the fact that this is something special and that it works and that it increases engagement, and the students, all the things that we say students should be doing, monitoring goals, setting goals, etc. They were doing it here in the Phil class, in a large part due to the personalization and just, the motivation of choice. And so I think it started to turn his gears about what would that look like in a math class? What would that look like in some of the other classes as well? How can we pilot that? And so when he said that, I told him that that's something that I've heard Tom talk a lot about. And I asked him, hey, can I get you in touch with Tom? I'll share with him what you just told me. So, I think now we're starting to think about facilitated interdependent learning across content areas. So we'll see if it leads anywhere. I've always said that Delmar's the place to do it because we're small. We can pilot these things without going through 17 administrators, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But at least we've tried it. So we'll see what happens. And we had a little bit of an administrative shakeup. Our superintendent didn't get renewed, and so that gentleman is now doing double duty as the curriculum director and interim superintendent. So I expressed to him to lean on me for whatever he needs curriculum wise, as it's kind of a wheelhouse for me. So we'll see what happens with that. Hopefully he doesn't get too busy and forgets about it, but I'll keep reminding him.
Yeah, do that. And if it would help, I'm happy to reach out to him after the new year. So yeah, because I think this conversation about the recognition that the approach is applicable in any discipline and across disciplines, especially, which is what my latest Substack is
One
going.
of the ways that I really made some changes when I was department chair at Central, Ryan, is I would put a little article with an executive summary of the article attached to it and leave it in the principal's box. And then his name was Dr. Moeller too, which was interesting, but he spelled it differently. And then I would make an appointment for him with about a week later. And then secretary reminded him I was coming, and we'd have a discussion about how this might apply. And it's kind of a little more subtle way and not so, I don't know, it really worked for him because then he was forced to read it. And if he didn't want to, he had the executive summary. And then I was coming in to bug him about it and in a positive way. And as a result of that, I got a company that he reached out to get a whole classroom of our first set of computers. And it's just treating them like they're also scholars who can see the research base that we're working about and what can be possible. I don't know, just a hint. It worked for me.
Yeah,
Great.
no, I like that. I'll definitely do that. There's been a few times where I gave him I would synthesize research into a Notebook LM podcast to give to him. So yeah,
Exactly.
multimodal. I'll give him the podcast and the article, and then follow up with a
That's
meeting. But I
great.
like that. I appreciate that.
Great. Also, I wanted to move next to Michelle and what she got to observe yesterday. Russell Hugo, that has been with us before, he's Washington, University of Washington, I didn't realize it, but he actually had 3 higher ed students, grad students, I think, who used a Phil approach for learning Estonian and Czech and Tibetan this last quarter. And so she was able to sit in yesterday into a Zoom with them presenting about their learning. And it was very exciting. 2 of them were live, but the one for Tibetan, I think, was pre-recorded or something. But it's like I say, I think as we push the boundaries beyond our original idea of high school application, it gets really interesting because it can meet so many needs. Maybe that's another separate line in that chart to talk about. And Ali, you could help us with this particularly about the things that Phil can help with in higher ed.
Mm-hmm.
So I would invite you to read her longer paragraph there if you haven't already, but very, very exciting. And oh yeah, she was talking about the Czech student who was using italki and really felt like he had made a lot of advancement. There was a little bit of discussion there about doing it with something like italki and something with a real person. But let me take just a minute here. I'm going to jump from instead of going to 7 next, I'm going to go to 8 and have Beth fill us in for a few minutes. As I mentioned, Beth was a Spanish teacher, a very wonderful Spanish teacher at the high school level in Kentucky, and then went to the Kentucky Department of Ed, where she was the first to start a virtual Mandarin program through KDE that wasn't it accessible across the country, Beth? I
Oh,
don't know.
yeah, it could have been.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know that we promoted it thusly, but yes, certainly was
Yeah.
open.
And I remember one of my discussions with Beth early on was I had heard the observation that students in a virtual environment can't form relationships the way you can in an actual classroom. And we know that relationships are the key or one of the key elements to learning. And so I wanted Beth to kind of revisit her experience as an online Spanish teacher and then as the developer of the Mandarin program at KDE, and just take a very brief time to talk about that, because I really think that one of our next goals ought to be getting Phil ready for the virtual environment. And we can talk about Khan Academy in that context too. So, Beth, can you just say a little bit about relationships in a virtual environment?
Sure. I worked, but before I do that, just briefly on Ryan's reporting, I think anytime an administrator pops into a classroom and is quote unquote blown away just because kids are learning, is that happy? That is so happy.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was fun to hear. I worked for KDE and their virtual program. We were under the most wonderful scenario of having a governor and an enlightened commissioner of education who said, take all the money you need. I don't want to see a budget. You have a bubble over you, go for it. And we were able to do wonderful things in virtual ed in Kentucky while that was in place. And part of what we did was expand the language program tremendously. And so we did have a number of programs, including then making contacts at North Carolina Virtual Public School, which was doing wonderful things in world language as well. And we brought in some Asian languages at that point by sort of leveraging some of the stuff that they did. And then ultimately I went to Middlebury Interactive Languages, which was just super, super wonderful. And the courses that they were creating and pushing out were radically different than any other online curriculum that was available. Really tough on the receiving end, not because they were difficult courses, but because the students were being asked to take so much ownership for what they were doing. And this was unusual at that time. It wasn't anything that they knew how to do yet. We hadn't taught them or allowed them to learn on their own. So, in terms of relationships, and I would hear the same thing Tom heard, but partly because there's a little anonymity with online courses. Sometimes kids are willing to or desiring to tell you things, get to know you in a different way. It is a completely different dynamic in some ways. Everything from this is what happened to me that landed me in the justice system to would you like to see my video on clogging? And kids would send me their performances, things I didn't necessarily have time to do in my traditional face-to-face classrooms. And so we were building relationships in some cases that were stronger and more meaningful than when I was teaching, my principal at that time giving me 6 preps a day with 50 kids a prep or whatever. It was sometimes not quite that bad, but
Not me.
felt like it. Anyway, so sometimes it was even a more personal relationship, and allowing for students to do the sort of self-personalization that you can with Phil just opens that door wider and wider, and seems to me like a really wonderful fit, being as a lot of resources are probably online already that they're using. Amazing tools out there now for organizing and building goals and monitoring progress and so forth. I'm a bit of a data nerd, so I like to see progress and think about unique ways to look at it.
So that
But
makes me
anyway,
think
it
that
was
it would be
grand.
helpful if you start to think about how some guidelines for a virtual fill approach might differ, and how even the application might differ for a learner who is trying to come at fill in the virtual platform as opposed to a traditional face-to-face one. So nothing urgent, but I think that that would really be important because it's not the same. It is different, and I think we can accommodate that difference. So another line or another section in the chart that Michelle has started would be that. All right, next, I just wanted to show you the little map we have here now of where we are finding fill. And I was so proud of doing this map, which was embarrassingly easy using Gemini, because all I did was go in and say, I want a US map by state, and I want you to mark these levels of implementation of fill. So the three, and I gave it the states, and then I sent it to Michelle, and she said, oh, you put Ron in Texas instead of Nevada, where he really is. So I just could go in, with 30 seconds and make the correction. And when you think about what something like this used to take in terms of time to produce, it really is quite startling almost in terms of how easy things are getting now. So let's keep adding.
Where's Hawaii on this map? Oh, down there. I see it. Okay.
But we need to be adding those. I'd love through Necessful to begin getting the word out. Maybe that's another way. Maybe we send the video link through the listserv.
Sure.
Good idea.
Don't know why we haven't.
What about Nadsville too?
Yes.
Do Nadsville too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah, I will do that. I will
And
do
maybe
that.
even Apple Central.
Tom,
Yeah.
you're talking about expanding, and since Beth is here, I'd like to hear her take on this too. I can't help but think in Jefferson County and it's like 100,000 students, where they have the backpack approach to learning and the defense at the end of the semester or of the year for fifth grade and 12th grade, where students choose their evidence and then have to defend their learning. How that they have the end of fill, but they could easily then adjust the beginning with the goal setting and the middle with the independent learning. I just think it's ripe for that in the next step.
Well, I sent a copy of the video to the vice chair of the Kentucky Board of Ed, and she was very, very impressed and asked me a few other questions. So you can imagine that my follow-up with her was quite extensive. And I mentioned wanting to get in touch with some folks like in Jefferson County or other initiatives that Lou is probably aware of around the country that are doing good things, because they said, we have no desire to be, big fill. I would be very happy for the fill approach to be kind of subsumed by other folks or included by other initiatives that are doing great things for kids. We don't need to be self-serving in terms of trying to, this is just a thing from Necessful or from the neural network. So hopefully Lou will take the bait and give us some traction there.
I can think of at least one Jefferson County teacher who's she's elementary, but what her students were doing backpack wise and the things, the videos and so forth that they presented and defended were just exemplary. And oh my goodness, they were having fun learning. They were all taking Spanish, although there was one young man who had some Italian heritage, and so she said sure, and he did an Italian backpack project. Just pretty amazing, really.
Alfonso too, he had his kids defending in the language.
Yes.
Alfonso was at the conference and was very enthusiastic. He had another kind of project that he was also working on, but I'll make a point to send it to Alfonso personally as well.
And Nadine.
And Nadine, right? Because I
And
also
Nadine,
talked to her at the
yes.
conference.
Mhm.
Yeah, good,
Yeah,
good.
she is really doing great things there with that
Yeah.
approach.
There's another thing that comes to my mind. You know, I was at Cornell not long ago, and one of the things they're doing with folks that they can't all at the Ivy League schools teach all the languages. So they have these things called consortiums. And so they were taking Russian with Yale and then some other language with Cornell and some other language with one of the other schools. This would be a perfect thing for that way they wouldn't have to pay that extra money to have the collaborative, but they could do it in-house with a full-fledged professor of world language, and have a Phil thing that would allow then the individual thing that. And I think the person to contact might be Angelika Kramer at Cornell. She might be someone interested. We should maybe invite her sometime to
Mhm.
Is that
talk
the
about this.
imperial we, or are you perhaps volunteering?
I'm so overwhelmed right now. My grandson just told me I was 4 years old and his best friend. So,
All right, all right. Well, we'll keep it in the recording here
You
and
know,
see if somebody else will pick
another
up on
group, another group that would really benefit would be Nickel Tickle,
that.
with all the less commonly taught languages. I don't know.
Yeah.
is that still run by, who's that run by now?
Yeah, I don't know anymore. Yeah.
Well, I know Jill Payton is quite involved
Joy.
with the community and Joy, the community and heritage language school, and she is a huge Phil proponent and advocate. So
Yeah, we're getting
I'll
quite a list there.
I'll make sure that she has seen the video at least as well. Great. Okay, we have about 10 minutes left, but I wanted to take a minute. I think all of us know Jay, and Jay, we're really happy to have you with us. Jay has a tremendous background for being able to provide us with some insights about his overall view of Phil, and then also what you might see or suggest going forward. So, Jay, just take a couple of minutes that we have, and we're glad you're here, and we hope you make.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for inviting me. Tom talked to me about this. Actually, he talked to me about this at Actful in what, 24?
Yeah.
And then a
yeah.
couple of weeks ago, we had a Zoom call and he talked to me about it, and I was very excited. And he said, "Oh, I'll send you the links." He sent me all the agendas and notes and the whole suite in typical Tom fashion. I know many of you. I don't know all of you. It's nice to meet those of you who I don't know. I was a former state supervisor and vice president of Successful from the state of Maine. I left my position at the state to return to the district as director of curriculum assessment and instruction, all content areas K-12. So someone earlier
Wow.
in our conversation today said Phil isn't just about languages, and that's exactly what I've been thinking all along. We're all language people here, but this is widely applicable across content areas for sure. I have since been working in the private sector, leading professional development, professional learning, most recently at Wayside Publishing, which claims to be a proficiency-based publisher, better than most, but still. And so that's where I'm coming at this from. And I messaged Tom earlier today to his comment about Actful using the term proficiency-based instruction. And I said to Tom, I think one of the things that I've really learned in the private sector that's been really valuable to me as I think about things like this or anything I do in the education space is really the importance of the marketing and the marketing message and getting that correct as early as possible in starting something rather than trying to go back and clarify with FAQs and adjustment of terms and whatnot. And Tom linked me to past conversations you all have that I admit I did not have time to look at, Tom, but he reassured me that's been a big part of the thinking, and I think that's tremendous because I've seen since Tom you called this out in one of ACTFul's webinars, I feel I've seen ACTFul not very good oftentimes at messaging and getting something quote unquote marketed very clearly and disseminated to audiences.
Yeah. Well, Jay, you're once again, I appreciate your enthusiasm about what we're working on, and that's very much an inclusive we with you in it. And your background in these other disciplines, especially as we look at how can we expand the opportunities for kids beyond just world languages, is going to be really very, very helpful for us. And plus, all of us who know you just like you anyway and are
Well,
happy
thank you.
that
We all want one of your spoons.
That's right.
We all do.
I've got
Make mine red, please. Red,
I've
please.
got 3 new ones sitting right here, Al.
Got a red one?
even
There
Nadine.
is, Madeline. There is a red one I'm looking
Well, there,
at.
it's got my name on it.
But just very quickly back to Phil. I think what blows my mind, if education is ready for it, is really I mean, in all grade spans, what this could mean, but particularly the elementary level. And I think that will be potentially a very hard nut to crack in educators' minds. But I think, and the reason why I say elementary level is because think of the trajectory of learning that would set those kids on as they moved through grade spans. I mean, that would be revolutionary.
That's their mindset, Jay. Their
And
whole,
drawing on kids' natural curiosity, their
Yeah,
natural
exactly.
playfulness, their natural willingness to be engaged. I mean, you want to talk about really addressing behavioral problems in the classroom, use a Phil approach.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
it would be astonishing at that grade span. I mean, all grade spans, but to me, that is really, really exciting to think about.
Well, to risk dating myself, but to come full circle, I went to a very small school in first grade, and there were 2 rooms. It was a 2-room schoolhouse for first through 8th grade, no kindergarten. So basically, we were living the Phil approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it worked. And it worked with one teacher in each classroom. And we were not feral children, we were educated. And I only mention that because some of you know me and therefore might wonder, but just the approach can work, and it can work in other disciplines than our languages, though we are the beacon at the moment. And I think that behavioral issue and the modifications that you mentioned, Jay, are important for us. Maybe that needs to be a line, Tom. I'm not sure we have a line there for how it works with, not especially using the term behavior modification, but within the classroom for
Yeah.
behavioral issues.
Yeah.
Well, what gives me hope is, and I think we talked about this before, is that the Nobel Prize for Economics went to a man who came up with creative destruction theory, where he completely destroyed the theory of how economics work. And he got the Nobel Prize for it. So that gave me hope. But I don't like the destruction necessarily, but the rethinking maybe. But it really is, I think we have to, we're still teaching it like the 19th century. Nothing's changed. We're still in rows and desks, and there's still a teacher at the front. This is kind of the opportunity we have while we're in such chaos in every other area that surrounds us. This might be the time that's right for us to really reach out to other disciplines. So I really like what Jay is saying, and the potential is there for other disciplines. But we also have to remember what happens oftentimes when these new creative destruction activities happen is people start using it without the proper guidelines, right? Without the proper, just dump these kids. Like that's what sort of happened in one of the schools I was in, this new way of approaching language. And suddenly I had all these special ed kids, but I worked with them fine, but the behavioral kids got put in there. And if there's a critical mass of folks that aren't engaged in that, it becomes very stressful. So I think, working first with the world language part of it is really important, that we have some data and that we know, like hearing Ryan say that ASL, that just, I thought I was going to jump out of my chair. If we have things like that, just little things like that, actually, they're very big things. And then we can go to the other disciplines and begin to say, how can this connect to you, and start making those critical connections.
And Allie, if
I
we
agree.
might, oh, sorry, if I might, we might just go back to the 18th century and think about Rousseau and think about what he had to say about education
Yeah,
and going
that's true.
outside and making the connections. And basically, he was saying exactly what the Phil approach is saying, but without the guidelines. But we don't have a new encyclopedia, to go with. So we'll take what we have.
I agree with what you said, Allie, 200%. And if I sounded like I was suggesting we go whole hog into all content areas, that's not what I intended. I just mean when I think further out, that's probably Tom.
Yeah.
When I think further out, I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, we have to establish that foundational data, just like we did with Linguafolio, where we could go to folks and say, look, look what this is doing. And then it doesn't have to be vast. Just one or two really solid studies that really give us some data that is reliable and evidence-based, and then we can start to make those connections.
And what Beth was saying, she's a data nerd, as we all should be. And we get our data set, and then Allie, then we're on the move again.
Yeah.
And I want to add to something else that Jay was talking about, and that is, as we look at potential expansion, both horizontally and vertically, I think it's important for us to remember that this isn't for everybody. It's kind of like what Ryan was talking about with Del Mar is a small district where they can do things and not run into big barriers. And I think World Languages has been kind of the same way, but also by the same token, we don't want to try to pull a teacher in or a group of teachers in who just aren't ready for it. And, that's kind of goes back to that guiding principle about absolute respect for the individual. It's not a judgment thing whether somebody would be a good candidate for a Phil approach, but it's just, where the individual is. Of course.
Well, now I heard you, so it's not for everybody. That kind of reminds me of what our governor Ricketts wanted to say. Our new state motto was going to change from Nebraska, the good life, to Nebraska, it's not for everybody. So maybe we want to be careful with that slogan there, Tom.
Yeah. Please don't put me on that track. All right. Well, if you will look in the chat, there's one more message there, but otherwise, unless somebody has something really pressing, I don't need to go into my AI cautionary table today, I guess, or tale. But boy, if my hair was not gray before, it is now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and shut off the recording, but it's been great to see everybody. If you have any questions, if you're listening to the recording of this, provided I get it out, and you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us about Phil and what we can do for you. All right. Thank you, everybody.